think we should probably make a start. I know that the people are still joining, but I think that might be the case, and we'll be waiting forever if we don't make a start. So I want to welcome everybody to today's PES Network webinar, which today is on supporting young job seekers in the recovery period. It's great to see so many people here today and the interest in this topic in this webinar. We have approaching 300 participants today, which is really great and shows the importance of this topic and the success, I think, of these webinars that the PES Network has been organising. So we look forward to the discussions today. We've got a really great agenda. This is actually, just to remind people, this is actually the 6th webinar that the PES Network has organised related to COVID themes. We've had previous webinars on topics such as capacity planning measures, support to employers, support to vulnerable groups, and even one back in September, which was on strategies to support recovery, which was either a bit ambitious or very good advanced planning, because we still sort of, we're still really thinking about, I think, entering the recovery period. But hopefully this spring and vaccines are gonna turn the corner for all of us, so we can increasingly look to the future. And that's the context of, a big part of the context of today's webinar on supporting job seekers in that recovery period. So my name's Ed Thorpe, and I'm going to be chairing today's webinar. But really the main man who's going to be guiding our discussions is our thematic expert, Eamon Davern. And I'm going to hand the floor to him in just a second to give an overview of this theme, why we're talking about it today, and to give an overview of the agenda and the great speakers that we're going to be hearing from different national contexts and some European organisations as well. After he's finished, I'll remind people about how they can participate and ask questions. There's going to be plenty of time for Q&As, so we want to hear from you, and I'll remind you how to do that after Eamon has given us that first overview. So Eamon, that's okay with you, I'll pass you the floor and you can introduce us to today's topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Good morning, everybody. So today we are focusing on young people. As I think I'm sure everybody on the webinar is aware, young people traditionally suffer particularly from the effects of structural unemployment. And I think there's unfortunately great risk that with the impact of the pandemic on the labour market, there'll be even more young people and indeed vulnerable people generally moving further to the back of the job queue if we don't take some important steps to try and prevent that. Distancing measures, changes in ways of working, and perhaps some trends fast-tracked by the impact of the crisis, such as further automation, have made perhaps education to work transitions more difficult than they were before. Very sensibly, addressing youth unemployment has been a priority for the European Union for a number of years, perhaps most notably with the Youth Guarantee. Evidence from the last crisis, the financial crisis back from 2008, indicates that personalised, targeted interventions are particularly necessary to combat the increasing barriers to labour market entry which young people can suffer, so we can try and avoid the scarring effects of longer-term inactivity. So this morning's webinar will particularly discuss how public employment services, working in combination with their stakeholder partners, can provide the specialist support that's needed to try and prevent and alleviate these problems. We're also delighted this morning to have observations from an employer and also a couple of young people sharing their insights from experiences of the crisis. We'll begin with a couple of presentations from the Netherlands, a country traditionally actually one with low numbers of youth unemployed. We'll be discussing how PES are tracking graduate progress to try and assist particularly people entering higher education to make the most informed career choices in terms of their future study, particularly important given the impact on the labour market of young people given the crisis. Then we'll have a very interesting presentation from an NGO from the Netherlands who talk about their work supporting integration of some of the most vulnerable people, particularly looking at how young people need and benefit from multidisciplinary interventions. A colleague from the French PES will then illustrate a very interesting practice targeting young people for training, career guidance and other support to help them benefit more from those particular interventions. We'll then have some questions from all of yourselves on these interesting practices, and then we'll have a couple of interventions from the European Youth Forum and Business Europe before some final questions for all of the panelists. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion as ever, and I'll hand back to Ed to explain a bit more about how you can pose your questions and to introduce our first speaker. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much indeed, Eamon. So just a couple of practical points from me. One comment just already in the chat, I've noticed, and a colleague has flagged in the chat that the automatic setting is to only send the message to the panelists. All panelists seems to be automatically selected. So if you want everyone to see your message, if you want to say hello to everyone or share some thoughts with everyone, then you'll need to select all panelists and attendees. So please be aware of that if you want to post a message in the chat. And you can keep sharing your thoughts and saying hello in the chat. But if you want to ask a question to any of our panelists today, it's important that you don't use the chat. We won't be monitoring the chat for questions to ask the panelists. Please post your questions in the Q&A box, and also, take the time to look at questions that other people may have asked, and you can upvote them so that they get seen, because we might not have time to address all the questions. So if you see one that you think is important and you want to hear answered, please look at that and tick that you want to that you support that question and want to hear it answered. So I think with that said, we can move straight on. We want to have as much time as possible to hear from our presenters and to let you ask your questions. So as Eamon said, the first the person we're going to be hearing from today is a representative of the Dutch PES. It's Mr. Michael van Smurenburg. He's the team leader at the Labour Market Analytics and Advice Department. And so you'll tell me how I should have pronounced your name, Michael. And then the floor is yours for 7 minutes. Presentation on the graduate tracking initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. It's difficult to pronounce my name, Michael van Smorenburg. Thank you very much, Ed and Eamon. I'm very honored to give a brief presentation for this European network of public employment services. Supporting young job seekers in the recovery period will be very important. And one of the ways of supporting them is by producing relevant labor market information for young people. And when they are more aware of the job opportunities, it could improve their labor market position. That's my point of view. Next slide, please. Despite the pandemic, there is a low unemployment rate in the Netherlands of 3.9%. And under 25 years of age, it's higher, and it rose more rapidly during 2020. But not the 40% youth unemployment like Spain. Youth unemployment is not seen as a major problem in the Netherlands. Like in other economic crises, when economy recovers, youth unemployment will drop quickly. We hope this will be repeated in the future. However, for some individuals, it may be difficult to find a job during the lockdown, especially for those who work in catering or hospitality. Another attention point is that youth unemployment is underestimated because a lot of young people withdrew from the labor market. They were not looking for a job or were not available during the lockdown. In the short run, you need some supporting measures for them, such as financial support and other support. In the long run, you need projects such as graduate tracking in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. Why graduate tracking? Well, not only because it was a recommendation of the European Union in 2017. Most of all because honest and relevant labor market information for students is lacking. Sometimes the quality of the information is not sufficient, or it is provided by organizations who have an interest in the outcomes of the choices of young people, like institutions who often offer further education. So we want to create reliable labor market information for students of initial education provided by organizations who are impartial. Early 2020, we compared 70 master studies and 87 bachelor studies, higher vocational education. And early 2021, we compared another 104 studies at secondary vocational education at different sub-levels. And we cooperate with the University of Amsterdam, the Economic Research Center SEO, and we use microdata from the Dutch Central Bureau of Statistics. We do not use survey data, but register data by combining different databases. So we have almost 100% coverage of about 218,000 graduates annually. Only graduates who leave the country are lacking. We can measure at any point in time after graduating, and we choose 1.5 years after graduating and 10 years after graduating. This discloses both the starting position as well as the career development of graduates. Next slide, please. Are very large differences between types of education, even within a certain level of education. For example, between graduates with a master's degree. Look at the indicator percentage with a permanent contract. It goes up from only 8% for neurosciences to 68% for graduates of the study accounting. So 2 out of 3 have a permanent contract within 1.5 years. That's quite high. There is also an enormous gap in hourly wages and in annual income, as you can see in the table. The best score for dentistry and the worst score for archaeology. When you studied medicine, you need only 1 month to find a substantial job, but after literature, you need 26 months. So we combine these 4 indicators to an overall score of the labor market position. Next slide, please. We made a ranking of those 70 master studies, as well as we did for the bachelor studies and for secondary vocational education at different sub-levels. You see the successful studies at the left side of the visual. The number 1 is accounting, econometrics at the second place, dentistry, teacher education sciences, fiscal law, and the least successful are the right side of the visual. The worst is archaeology, literature, arts, cultural studies, and also cultural anthropology has a bad labor market position. Next slide, please, and that will be the last one. I come to my conclusions and advices. There are large differences between types of education regarding labor market outcomes. Within the limited time of 7 minutes, I only could show a few results, but results show a strong correlation of 0.8 between the starting position of a type of education and the labor market position 10 years after graduating. It is another indication that the type of education you choose has long-term effects on labor market outcomes. So it's very important for young people to think thoroughly about the type of education they choose. And they have to be supported by reliable and relevant data provided by the PES and by career guidance at schools or PES. We know that a lot of graduates regretted their earlier educational choice, partly because labor market information was not available. We know from other research and PhD research that labor market information matters in the choices they make. When they become more aware of the interests which are at stake, the price of their choice, their return on investment could be improved. And for society, you might prevent unemployment and stimulate job security and higher incomes. My opinion is that you have a nice business case with only winners. Thanks for your attention. I hope I made my points.
Thank you very much indeed, Michel, for that super interesting presentation and perspectives from the Netherlands. Before I hand over to our next speaker, I just want to respond to a couple of questions I've seen in the chat already in the Q&A box, just to clarify that all presentations will be provided to everyone, and we'll provide a link to that at the end, so you don't have to sort of note down everything that you're seeing in the slides. You'll be given access to those afterwards. And also, we won't take questions individually for our presenters. We'll have the first three presenters and then do a round of questions and answers for all three of them. If you have any questions specifically for Michel, don't hesitate to already post it in the Q&A box, and Eamon will pick up on those questions after we've heard from our colleague from the French PES, and then immediately now the representative from another Dutch representative of a Dutch organization that also works with supporting the integration of vulnerable young people in the labour market. And so for the next 7 or so minutes, I give the floor to Carl de Mister, who's the program manager for the youth approach at Vina XL. And you'll tell us a little bit about your organization and the work you've been doing, Carl. Thank you. You're muted, Carl. If you can, yeah, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yes, we can hear you now.
Do you see my presentation already?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to show you a glimpse of my organization and what we are standing for. And in this presentation, I would like to focus first on who are we, our mission, and then to focus more on the support of youngsters, and to show you also the different partnerships that we have on local, regional, and even on international level. So to start with, who are we? Well, we are a public work development company of the municipality of 's-Hertogenbosch. And as a public organization, we are required to implement policies based on social legislation and local political decision-making. But always we have an available bandwidth for tailor-made services, because that is very important. And our mission is to guide people from the municipality who are at a distance from the labor market to find work, or to allow them to participate in society according to their ability. And also very important is that we ensure income as a last social safety net to guarantee people a minimum financial income. If you look at the overview of people who are working for us or in an reintegration process, you can see that there are more than 2,000 persons that are working in one way or another for our company. So that could be on social workplaces, that could be with wage subsidy, that could be in experienced places, in sheltered employment. And beside that, we have 500 persons who are participating as a volunteer or in daily activity. And we have 3,300 persons in 's-Hertogenbosch who depend on social welfare. Among them, there are 383 youngsters. And due to Corona, we noticed that there has been a large increase the last weeks of vulnerable youngsters applying for social benefits. That's something that we have to deal with. If you look at the services that we provide, you can see that we are working with different approaches. On the left, you can see the outcome regular work. The approaches are depending on the wage values. There are people that come to us and we don't need much effort to help them to enter the labor market, but that is changing radically. So we have more group approaches, social participation, and individual approach with different tools underneath it, like wage subsidies, supported employment, work experiences, no risk policies. I use some terms that I won't explain now because otherwise I will go too much in detail. But if you have any questions about that, you can ask me later. If we look at the youngsters that are coming to us, you can see that we have different kind of target groups. Mostly nowadays we have youngsters from special education and secondary vocational education who need our guidance. Those youngsters are often 16 years old. And if you have the right for a benefit, you have to be at least 18 years old. So those youngsters come to us just to be helped and that we can guide them to enter the labor market. But we also have to deal with refugees. We have to deal with youngsters who need a benefit. And we have also like young ex-prisoners. Each target group is gets a special services and also tailor-made trajectories. That is a bit the difference in the target groups that we are facing with concerning youngsters. And aside of that, we also have people who are older than 27, but I'm focusing now on the youngsters. Looking at the internal services, we have a multidisciplinary team of consultants. So we have an income consultant that are the ones who are looking at the benefits and to see if everything is all right. And we have work consultants that are the consultants who are guiding the youngsters to work or to other kinds of activities. We have diagnosis consultants, like for instance, to see what the wage value would be for someone, so we could give subsidy to the entrepreneurs. Job coaches, we have life coaches, we have youth workers where we have matches. Matches are the ones who are matching between the youngster and the entrepreneur to see if the job will match with the youngster. And the account managers, that are the managers who are going to the entrepreneurs to see if there are vacancies and if we can put people to work. Then we have training facilities like training on social skills, training on employee skills, but also application trainings. Furthermore, we have traineeships, internships, and apprenticeships. We have work experience placements, and we also have sheltered workplaces. A lot of these things are happening inside of the organization because we are a merge of a social welfare and a reintegration company. Then supporting tools. Well, we have a program line youth approach. I'm a program manager of that. We have additional budget for youngsters. We work with work development plans. We use social return, wage values and wage subsidy, no risk policy, job coaching, use of virtual reality and gamification. That's an innovation in our company. Debt assistance, but also alternative and innovative instruments. We're always looking for other instruments that we could use for guiding youngsters. Concerning external services, well, we collaborate with various reintegration organizations, such as UEV, that's the public employment company, collaboration with youth organizations, with compulsory education, a diverse trajectory offer from development-oriented daytime activities, learn work trajectories to work experience places. What is very important is that we have to pay attention to the serious, immediate and long-term implications of Corona on the physical and mental health of youngsters. Therefore, we want to work more closely with the health sector. Then, partnerships. We have them on local level and on regional level. So we're working with education, youth organizations, the public employment service, other departments within the municipality. And on regional level, we are collaborating with education, municipalities, and also the public employment service. And that is with the aim of realizing a general approach between education and the labor market for vulnerable young people so that they can find a sustainable place in the labor market. And finally, we also have partnerships on international levels. So we are working with different partners in Erasmus projects. And we are focusing at the moment to use instruments and methods in the domain of art and sport. That was my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will give the word back to Ed or Evan.
Thank you very much indeed, Carl. for that interesting presentation. Before I hand over to the for our colleagues from the French PES, just another couple of practical reminders. I saw someone posted a question in the chat. Please remember, if you've got a question for the panelists, to post it in the Q&A box, which is just to the left of the chat. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you should see the Q&A, and there's 4 questions there already. We might miss. I mean, if you're not able to post it across, I might try and post it across myself during the next presentation. But try and post it in the Q&A and specify. Most people are doing, but if your question is for one speaker in particular, don't forget to specify who it is. Otherwise, feel free to ask a question which could address all our speakers. So without further ado, the third and final presentation in this section, before we have a round of Q&A with Eamon, is from Ashley Waring. Ms. Ashley Waring, who's the International Expert Benchmarking and Communication Department in the French PES Pôle Emploi. And she'll be telling us about an initiative that they're using to try and target young people, offering training, career guidance, and other forms of support. So Ashley, for the next 7 or 8 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Good morning, dear colleagues. Good morning, dear attendees. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk this morning and promote Pôle Emploi's action in fostering youth employment. Absolutely, I will be telling you about how Pôle Emploi has contributed into fostering this one young person, one solution plan that the French government has set within France's recovery plan, France Relance. Next slide, please, Chiara. In order to introduce that, I would like to give you a very quick overview of the 5 principles that structure our action. And of course, we adapt our action to a very local reality in order to provide a very specific and adequate answer. So in this perspective, a territorialized approach seems more necessary than ever. We also focus on our action on priorities in order to multiply the impact that we would like to bring to our customers, whether they are young persons or the companies, but I will talk about that a little bit later, as quickly as possible to companies also in recruitment needs, by acting in anticipation, being proactive at the same time, in order to support the recovery and have a very also approach regarding the recruiting in the short term. We try to focus also on sectors that are promising by a long-term strategy, aiming training job seekers and accompanying the economic transition at the emergence of new professions. But all this job cannot be done without the partnerships and the action of our stakeholders and partners that are also contributing and being a great part of this action. Of course, they are all dedicated to foster this employment and particularly dedicated to youth employment in sectors and professions and organizations that are bringing a great value of action. And it seems quite obvious, but we have to mention that there is a regular monitoring and evaluation of our action in order to be more proactive and also to appreciate the work that has been done and that still has to be done in front of us. Next slide, please, Chiara. Thank you. Let me highlight on 3 main goals that will be very concrete actions to understand a bit better this one young person, one solution plan. We have an objective achieved for 2020 and also for 2021 that I will be explaining to you in a few seconds. By doubling the number of places in intensive youth support program that is within the range of services of Pôle Emploi, we have set a goal in 2020 of 1,500 admissions of young persons in this program, and we have been able to notice that there were more than 150,000 persons entering the program, which allowed us to set a bigger goal for 2021 to 2,200 and 1,400 entrances. Pôle Emploi, to achieve this goal, has recruited over 600 AIG counselors, which stands for Accompagnement Intensif Jeune, which is the range of service allowing Pôle Emploi counselors to accompany young persons in our institution. And there is also another segment of guidance, because we haven't done this job alone. Also, as I was precising previously, our partners also dedicated to youth guidance provide a service. So we have been able also to refer to them more than 240,000 job seekers to bring intensive support and also to have a more rapid orientation within the labour market. We can cite a few of them, Mission Locale, APEC and others, that specialize exclusively in their guidance also and bring more precise service than what we can bring and what would need otherwise. And since January 2021, there have been rapid implementation of new financial aid by the government dedicated to young people and intensive support, focusing on occasional difficulties they may face as housing or others. The payment can be made on the basis of the diagnosis established by a partner that determines the amount, and we can also provide the payment afterwards, of course. Next slide, please, Chiara. The second goal would be strengthening young people's skills. As you know, to enter the labor market, we need training, we need skills. And these skills must be, of course, taken into account by reinforcing the use of digital pass, which is a public service of digital experiments about skills. It allows the inefficiencies that are identified to be taken into account and also being addressed. We increased, in this perspective, workshops and services provided by Pôle emploi, but also additional training, more than 100,000 new qualifying or pre-qualifying training courses for young people, and also qualifications, and 16,000 training courses in the healthcare sector, for instance. In 2020, 160,000 young job seekers were registered in training program. There has been promotion of professional training, free apprenticeship funded by the Plan of Investment of Skills, bringing together apprentices and recruiting companies. Final slide, please, Chiara. Thank you. The third and last would be offering an enhanced support for companies recruiting young people. Like I said previously, there can't be any recruitment without company. So in this case, Pôle emploi is obviously committed to promoting the subscriptions of incentives for young people in order to achieve this goal. And Pôle emploi also promotes these measures of the one young person, one solution plan, Un jeune, une solution, by the recruitment assistance, apprenticeship assistance, incentives dedicated to youngsters living in disadvantaged neighborhoods. On this particular item, I would like to highlight on the right of the screen, you can have some key figures that illustrate this achievement. As you can see, for the disadvantaged neighborhood, for instance, the incentive is called Emploi Franc, and there has been more than 5,000 ones signed by job seekers in 2020. And the goal we have set for 2021 is 13,000. Numerous recruitment events dedicated to young people have been organized also in each professional field, as Pôle emploi, as I said before, co-builds and updates the Un jeune, une solution platform. There is a website dedicated to this plan. But I would like also to add that since February the 15th, the French government has also, with the help of the PES and the partners, set a free toll number for the families and the job seekers to have access to information, services, professional events, and so on. There is also the action that is necessary and strategic from the councillors that carry out systematic reminder to the employer for each job vacancy and make sure that they have the support needed in the recruitment process. And just a few also other key figures that are important for the merchant and non-merchant sectors about the number of the incentives that have been signed in 2020 that I would like to bring to your attention, and the goals that we have set for 2021. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm available for your questions should you have any.
Thank you very much indeed, Ashley. So now, following those three presentations, it's time to sort of share our thoughts and reflections. I've seen there's quite a few questions now being posed in the Q&A box, so I'll pass the floor directly to, let's say, our thematic expert, Eamon. Perhaps a few of your initial reflections, Eamon, and then you can pass the floor to the different Q&A questions that have been asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I think, well, thank you for very interesting presentations. Clearly, a lack of adequate information is one of the major sources of labour market dysfunction. And so clearly young people need to be aware of the choices that are available. Further to that, clearly, as a consequence of the crisis, certainly particularly vulnerable young people are suffering from the impact of kind of multiple deprivation, and therefore a very kind of a cohesive, coordinated response is needed to ensure that all of those problems can be addressed so that somebody is ready to start perhaps on a journey towards employability. And again, as we heard then finally from our colleague from the French Public Employment Service, it's particularly important to focus on the needs of young people in the most disadvantaged areas and to actively engage with employers to make sure they are fully cooperating, and we have training programs orientated towards moving people towards available jobs. I mean, perhaps building on some of those themes, perhaps first for Michelle, a couple of linked questions on a similar subject actually, but a couple of colleagues have made a very interesting point that you assess progress of graduates after 1.5 years and 10 years. A colleague has mentioned that clearly the labour market is changing extremely rapidly. Do you do within your programme interventions to ensure you can update your systems, taking into account the changes in the labour market over that period? And do you do anything to track the progress of graduates between 1.5 years and 10 years? Do you look at their progress in the interim period?
It is possible with the data, but we didn't do this. So we calculated the progress within those 9 years, and we calculated 1.5 years after graduating and 10 years after graduating. So 2 points in time, and we compared those 2 points in time. And we also have another research project, which is a forecasting project. And this tells us something about the future developments per type of education and per occupational group. But the disadvantage of forecasts is that it is less reliable, maybe more valid, but less reliable. But we want to integrate that in the future with the graduate tracking project. So our basis will be the graduate tracking. These are reliable data of graduates. And in the future, we will integrate the forecasting project partly to this project. So then we have a clear picture of the recent situation of graduates and an overview to the future.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So clearly a combination of the very good data you've got and some informed forecasting can perhaps provide the ultimate information. Thank you. Carl, a couple of questions following your very interesting presentation. One particularly is asking what you do to kind of allocate one advisor to one client, or do you have an approach where people work more collaboratively together? So to what extent do you have advisors who focus on the needs of one of your young people, or how far do they work as part of a wider team on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there is we have processes within the organization. So what is most important is the first intake. So when a youngster comes to us, he meets work consultants, and that's the first person that he will have contact with. And then there was a big intake. We also have assessments, sorry. And then the work consultant, together with the clients, looks what kind of path he can go through the organization. So what he needs. So that can be that he has to have trainings, but can also be that maybe that is not possible, that the work consultant has to contact external organizations to have more information. We work also with the education, so we get a lot of information also about the youngster and advice from the education, what we could do, what is behind the background of the youngster. So the first intake is the most important process to go further and then to work on a plan of development and to try to get as much as possible a tailor-made trajectory for the youngster. I don't know if that's the answer to the question.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Carl. Now moving on to the presentation from our Pôle emploi colleague. For Ashley, we've got a question here noting the very impressive results you've had in encouraging young people to train for healthcare. Question is, how have you managed to attract such interest there? Was it to do with kind of online assessments that were conducted with young people before they actually embarked on those training courses? Was it about some other kind of conversations you had with them, or was it about your kind of marketing of those particular opportunities? So what was the key to your success in that particular area?
Thank you for pointing this out. Actually, we pride ourselves in saying that we have been a little bit more proactive about that, as we conduct annually a poll to know a little bit more about the needs of the companies. So we have been aware of the situation in this professional sector, particularly as it is everywhere else. But more particularly for us, I mean, we haven't been expecting this crisis as everyone, though we have been also helped by the French government that had set in place and set in motion many actions that provided also a more visible strategy about this sector. So we have initiated trainings that were more accessible with maybe lower skills, and on short term also to be able to conduct this youth and job seekers to be a little bit more interested and sensitive to this sector, because it's not always easy to attract skills and profiles. I mean, there is also an important investment of Pôle emploi in the training, whether financially or a bit more by the forecasts. So all this work hasn't been done over 2020 only, but has been really started way before, and we have been more or less ready, but we had to be a little bit more aware of it, and so we had to accelerate it.
Thank you very much. Now I've got a question from Michelle. I think this is a very interesting one and gets perhaps to the heart of the whole issue about the choices of study that young people make. I mean, clearly society needs a full range of skills. Society needs dentists, economists, bus drivers, anthropologists and archaeologists, but perhaps it doesn't need as many archaeologists and anthropologists as young people seeking to pursue those areas of study, which can be a difficulty. The question here is that in the Netherlands, given your very impressive record on maintaining low youth unemployment, do the government look at the labour market need for certain occupations in terms of the way that they fund places on certain areas of study? So do the government seek to fund courses of higher education that are more likely to lead to positive labour market outcomes? Is that taken into account?
Yes, they do to a certain extent. The government does, but also the educational institutions do. They look at the labor market perspectives, and when they want to start a new type of education, for example, they have to prove that there is a good labor market perspective for the graduates. So there are incentives for institutes to offer types of education with good labor market perspectives. But on the other hand, they also have an incentive to attract as much students as they can. And sometimes these types of educations are, well, very popular for students, like psychology, for example. It's very popular for students. So educational institutes will attract them. And well, there is another interest for the educational institutes as well. So it's a bit complicated.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very helpful clarification there. One of the key issues in engaging with people from vulnerable groups, particularly young people, is often trying to attract them to come and take advantage of the services that are offered. I've got a question here for Ashley about Pôle emploi engagement with young people, particularly in terms of those from disadvantaged neighbourhoods. Could you perhaps, Ashley, explain in a little bit more detail about what Pôle emploi does in terms of outreach to actually attract young people to come and speak to you about what you can offer them? So how do you get them to actually engage with you?
Absolutely. We understood that in order to reach this particular demographic, we had to speak the language. So we invested in a new approach in the communication process, for instance. So we are a bit more visible on their own social networks such as Instagram. So we allow experiments to our counselors within the AIG, which I explained a little bit earlier in our range of services. The counselors can communicate, create groups, and try to engage with them in order to reach them more regularly. So because we know that it's difficult to keep in touch with them at times, even if we have a first appointment. And let's not forget the partners. They are extremely important in this process, as they have a different approach that is totally complementary with ours. In this order, they go into the neighborhoods, they visit the social houses, the social actions, the associationships, and so they are able to see them really in situ. That's how we can reach them out, and we can try to establish a contact and keep it. That's the most important.
Thank you very much. And I think we've perhaps got time for one more question, Ed, looking at the time now. Do you think? I think perhaps just for one more.
Actually, Eamon, I was going to suggest that we extend, because I think there's quite a few interesting questions been asked. I think we can extend this Q&A session for another few minutes.
Okay, excellent.
We'll keep going till 11, and then we'll move on. We'll stop at 11 and move on to the next section.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a further question here for Ashley, actually, about Polyempoir's engagement with particular groups. Do you do any work specifically in Polyempoir in relation to the Roma community, Ashley, in terms of your activities with young people?
Well, Polyempoir, as the public service of employment, will of course apply the governmental approach in this term, and we just provide service to any person entering our offices or asking for it. So we have an approach that is holistic, and that will apply according to the situation of the individual, regardless to their origins or any other particular requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. A question here actually for Michelle, perhaps building on the earlier intervention that you made. What do you think is the best approach to apply to those people who don't actually want to pursue the kind of training program that you think may be in their best interests? So if they are actually determined to pursue an educational path that might not lead to their best potential labour market outcome, how do you think we should approach that particular problem? What's the best way to work with a young person?
We don't want to advise them not to study arts or cultural anthropology or whatever. It's their own decision to make their choices. And but my feeling is that a lot of them are not well informed. So they don't make informed choices. They don't know what the consequences will be of their choice with respect to labor market situation. And I think it's important that the information is provided by organizations which are impartial, so they can give the real and realistic picture of the consequences of their choices. And so the provision of labor market information for students, it's important that it is organized by impartial organizations.
Okay, thank you very much. Carl, one of the unfortunate consequences of the crisis that has been reported in many countries is an increase in mental health problems amongst the population as a whole, perhaps particularly affecting those from more vulnerable groups. Would you be able to share any insights from how your organisation particularly engages to support young people presenting with mental health problems?
Well, yes, that's a problem that is hard to face, because yesterday I had a meeting with the work consultants to ask them what they need to help those youngsters. And they said that, they said nowadays each youngster has his own problems. It's very difficult to have a general program on this youngster. So you really need to take them separately and individually. And what they said was that the big problem is that some youngsters that need healthcare or mental health care are inscribed in the institution, but they are on a waiting list. And that's the problem, that because they have to wait before they are accepted, or they have an how do you say this, an interview. In the meantime, the work consultants have to deal with that, but they are not expert on mental health care. So what we try to do is to see them as often as possible, because sometimes there are even youngsters who are really, that we are afraid that they will commit suicide. There are youngsters who really express that. So that's why we have this life coach in the organization. And he tries to invite them as often as possible to just to, you know, to communicate, to talk about things, to see what is happening, to help them in any way, to support them. And what we need, and that's something that we are discussing in our organization, we really would like to hire psychologists and other experts within the organization, so we could do that more quickly than depending on institution of healthcare. That's one thing. And the other thing is that we will we will talk with the healthcare if there are no possibilities to shorten this waiting list. I don't know if that's correct English, but to invite them more quickly. That's a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Ashley, one of the most important issues for public employment services in recent years has been dealing with the well, the so-called NEET population, young people not in employment, education or training. Would you be able to share any kind of observations with us about what Pôle Emploi does to particularly engage with the NEETs to try and encourage them to kind of collaborate with you and think about coming back into labour market engagement, training programs, or looking for work? So thinking particularly about the NEET population.
Sure, thank you, Eamon. Actually, we rely also on our network of partners. As I said before, it's important to engage with them and to have their commitment on our side in order to reach the needs called also invisible. It's not always a very nice expression, but unfortunately, it's a reality also. We try to be present by their side, going to their field clearly. So there is also a European program called Speed You Up that has enhanced the possibility for public service of employment and recipients of funds, of European funds, that engage young people, especially NEETs, in developing their entrepreneurial skills in order to make them aware of their potential and abilities within the labor market. It's not always for them to be aware of who they are, what they can be able to do or not. And it is our job, I think, and this is how we have engaged in Pôle Emploi also, in this decentralized also action, to bring a framework and means and abilities, also professional ones, to let them know that they can have access to training programs, that they can have advice, they can have information, and also they can also experiment their very own company during the summer, for instance, break. This is one experiment we have been leading over the last 2 years, and we hope that we will be able to continue. But there are many others in different regions. As I said previously at the very beginning of my presentation, we have a territorialized approach. So what is existent in one region may not be existent in another, but there is also a solution for the needs in that region that is different, that it will be corresponding to their needs. But most importantly, the partners are really doing a job of trying to see them, to approach them, and also to refer them to Pôle Emploi in order to register and also be guided in their professional pathway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've discussed the graduate tracking and looked at the problems of particularly vulnerable young people. Often there's a view that perhaps we should be doing more to engage with children at the earliest possible opportunity, perhaps while they're still in secondary school, to try and maybe intervene to head off problems which can emerge later through perhaps them not making the best choices. Perhaps, Carl, have you got a view about what could be perhaps done from more active interventions with children still in upper secondary school before they leave school and enter the labour market or move to further education? Do you think there's more we could do to intervene with children at a younger age to try and prevent the kind of problems that your organisation deals with?
Yeah, but you know, we have a big discussion also with education. Where is the responsibility? Because we see that as a reintegration company, it's like education is saying, yeah, but you know, you are from reintegration, you are from the labor market, so you should do something about that. And we think, yeah, we can do this, but we'll have to do it in collaboration with you, because as education, you also have a responsibility, and you also have to provide internships and things like that. So we are discussing this also with education, because there's a win-win situation also for us, because what we don't want is that youngsters come to us that because they need a welfare. So we want to try to get them into the labor market before that, or even with collaboration with the education, to see if we could add some other trainings, or maybe we have also different tools, like we call it the starter, how do you call this? It's a budget that we give to students that are who finish their study and they can't find a job. And so we say, okay, you know, we will give you 500 euros a month and 100 euros to the entrepreneur who hires you. And you will get a 1-year chance to enter the enterprise that you like, that is corresponding with your education. And then you can prove yourself. And the 100 euros that we give to the entrepreneur is more like for the expenses and the extra guidance. That's one thing. So we are looking also for other things, how we could collaborate more with education to help them. But it's a difficult question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Perhaps finally, as we move towards the next section, perhaps building on that again, perhaps I could ask Michelle, do you think there is more that the different institutions in terms of the employers, government, educators, employment services could do to work collaboratively to try and ensure that they are all making their optimum contribution to dealing with young people's labour market integration? Could we do more to break down the institutional barriers between the different bits of the administration who share responsibility for supporting young people?
Yeah, cooperation is the most important thing between employers and public employment service, but also educational institutes to cooperate together and to make use of the different strengths of each organization. And for example, the Public Employment Service has quite good labor market information and has their expertise, and that could be used in cooperation with those other partners like the employers and educational institutes. So, I should say the most important thing is to cooperate together and to use each strengths of the different organizations.
Thank you very much.
May I add something to that? What is a very big problem, that is the privacy, and also the different systems that we work with. So you can collaborate with each other, but there's also always the issue of if you have to share information with each other, this is the privacy. And sometimes it's very difficult to share the information. So that's, well, we should do something about that also, because in the Netherlands we are very strict in this privacy rules, and that is an obstacle sometimes.
Thank you. There's also a very well reported obstacle that sometimes organisations collect the same information in a different way. So when they attempt to actually share it, they get different perspectives on what the actual problems of the young person might be, which sounds like an obvious point, but it's been a great problem in combining support systems for young people. Perhaps finally then, before handing back to the next section, I've got really an observation here that there's always a risk that we need to avoid striking an incorrect balance between trying to get a young person to focus on their issues and dealing with them, but also get them to focus about work as well, and trying to strike the right balance between supporting people to improve their kind of perspectives, but also make sure they're still motivated to look for work can be quite a difficult agenda, which I'm sure is the case. Well, thank you very much for all those fascinating questions, and I think a really excellent discussion. Unfortunately, we're kind of now past 10 o'clock, so I think I'll perhaps hand back to Ed for the next section, and thank the panelists very much for their excellent comments.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you Eamon for leading a really interesting discussion there. It is time to move on now to get some slightly different perspectives. We're going to hear from representatives both from the European Youth Forum, bringing the younger people's perspective, and from Business Europe, from an employer's perspective. So I think it allowed an extra layer to the discussions we've been having so far. We will have hopefully time. We wrap up in half an hour, 11:30. Eamon's I think on UK time there with his 10 o'clock. But
apologies.
We'll wrap up in half an hour. And so if you do have any final questions, you can still post them in the Q&A box for the panelists there, and we'll see if we have time to pick up on them. But now we're going to, as I say, change our focus slightly. And the first presentation, we're going to have a short commentary from representatives of the European Youth Forum, looking at particularly the challenges experienced by young people in the early phases of their career. And I think we're going to be hearing from both Ms. Edelmira Ferri and Ms. Ana Villaseñor, who come from Spain, I believe, but representing today the European Youth Forum. So the floor is yours for the next 5 or 6 minutes.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, my name is Edelmira and I come from Spain. As you said, I belong to the International Affairs Committee of the Youth Spanish Council, or CJE. I'm going to try to be very brief because I know that we're running out of time, and my intervention also is going to go in the same line but yours. But in relation to the challenges experienced by young people in the early phases of their career, we find in Spain, I think, which is a European common problem in every country, the problem of structural youth unemployment. And what do we mean by this? We are very, we assure that governments are not really investing in adapting the educational systems to the needs of the labor market. And this has two main consequences. School early dropouts, which in the end lead to more unemployment. And also in Spain, we find many university graduates who are wonderfully prepared and ready to work, but for whom there are not really many chances to fit in the market. In this case, we truly think that governments in general should be offering training, alternative training or vocational training, something maybe more technical that could help people fit more in the labor markets. And also we could avoid having graduates taking jobs for which they are overqualified. In the end, this leads to a lot of frustration. And also in terms of what support measures are needed to ease the impact of the pandemic crisis, in the CJE, we think that we have to reformulate the labor market. And what do we mean by this? Also, we need to reduce temporary and partial employment and give less weight maybe to non-traditional form of access to the labor market. And this also means reducing internships and scholarships that help enterprises keep young people working in sometimes non-desirable or poor conditions for a long period of time. Also, we think that we need to be more effective with the application of the Youth Guarantee Program in our case, because as many of you know, we have different communities for which we will have to accompany the autonomous administration in its implementation most of the time. So we need to be very attentive at the level of state to see which policies work and which don't, in order to reformulate them. Because it must be the beneficiary, the one who goes to the youth guarantee, and not the company that intends to take advantage of the subsidies in the end. And finally, I would like to highlight the need of reformulating the country's productive model by promoting sustainable sectors that generate more efficiency and higher quality employment. That's our vision in a very brief period of, I think I'm using my 2 minutes, so this is what we think in the CJE. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Edelmira. Anna, are you going to add some words?
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving the voice to young people to talk about the employment issue that especially affects us here in Spain. Here, the youth unemployment rate, according to Eurostat, is 41%, and according to Europe rate, 30% of young people are at risk of social exclusion. My situation, although it's personal, can be extrapolated to many young people in my country. For example, me, after 4 years of university, I studied modern languages and literature, and I'm specialized in English and Italian. And without the possibility of employment, I cannot emancipate myself and develop my own project life. So therefore, I returned to my parents' house, which is in a rural village that belongs to one of the communities most affected by youth unemployment. So as you can see, 2020 was already beginning for many without expectations, as it was my case. And the arrival of the pandemic crisis seriously affect this situation. And for example, in my case, I was not studying, and it wasn't like an impossible mission to look for a job. And I have to say that I had all the possible applications installed in my mobile phone, as for example, LinkedIn, InfoJobs. But either there were no job offers for someone who had studied philology, or they were very precarious, or they look at your curriculum and in less than a half minute, they reject you. And I look for anything, as sub assistant, as teacher, receptionist, translator, but in all of them, you can find thousands of people registered, and sometimes nobody even wrote to you. And also I have to say, although I was registered as unemployed, I never received any offer. So I think that is one of the problems. And one day I had a stroke of luck because a friend sent me an offer, and it was for an English teacher in an academy in 2 different towns from mine. And I applied, and they liked my curriculum because I'm graduate in philology, I'm monitor, lecturer, and free time, and I have experience in educational project with children at social risk exclusion. So this contract, it was a partial contract of 22 hours per week. And I have to say that in my case, I can afford it because I live with my parents and I don't have a rent to pay. But otherwise, it would have been impossible to do it, because here, for example, we have to invert 90% of our salaries to rent a house. And also, I have to say that I find this job and this allowed me to access a master's degree. So, because I was not entitled to a scholarship, so that allowed me to continue studying. And definitely, I can say that I'm one of the lucky few people who have been able to find a job during the pandemic crisis, but it has not been easy. I have been registered on many applications and job portals, and I have shared and dug through the thousand precarious job offers. And I think that also I have faced the worst conditions that our young people can face to access to the labor market, that are being a woman, being a young graduate, and living in a rural environment where there are hardly opportunities for young people to look for a job. And this provokes the uncertainty and the lack of expectations. And this affects us to the young Spanish people, because we are facing a future in which we are already being told that we will be the first generation that will live worse than their parents. So I think that we have a lot to work on this topic. And that's all. So I hope you found my experience useful, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to both of you, and particularly Anna, for sharing a very personal story there and a very interesting perspective of real life on the ground for young people in Spain. So I want to press on and move directly to another Anna, this time Dr. Anna Kivekiewicz Mori, who's an advisor at Business Europe, who'll be talking to us a little bit more about some of the uncertainty and challenges posed by the rapidly changing labour markets from the employer's perspective. So, Dr. Kivekiewicz Mori, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting Business Europe to this important discussion. And I found the presentations extremely inspiring and also in tune with what we say. So thank you very much for stressing the importance of
we're just losing.
The existing jobs are changing.
Yeah.
So the role of, from our perspective, the role of PES in guiding young people position from the market, but also
Anna, sorry, could I just interrupt
when they
you?
are
Could I ask
already
you maybe
on the labor market is very, very important.
Could I ask you to turn off your, maybe if you turn off your video, because I think I'm just trying with the audio only.
Yeah, I think I've lost the connection. I'm on again.
Okay, that's better. That seems to be better. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so guidance very, very important in the transition from education to labor market, but also later. Another important, very important point: reach out to inactive as young people. Are we? Do you still hear me? Because I'm.
Yes, it's but I maybe if you turn off your video, it might be slightly better quality. Now we don't hear you anymore. I don't know, Eamon, if you want to, while we try and get Anna back, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, perhaps
give a first reaction. I don't know if there's any questions, but people, don't forget people to post your questions. Yeah, we've still got time to pick up on a few more questions. People that have spoken.
Yeah, I mean, following Anna's.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm back. I don't know what happens. Are we connected now?
Okay, do you want to try and we'll see if we can hear. I'm afraid we still can't hear you. I think probably we're going to have to accept that it might not work today.
Okay.
So it's okay with you. Yeah, sorry about that, Dr. Kivic. I don't know if you want to send if you have any notes you can send in that we can share with participants maybe after the event, or perhaps write to you. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I think we'll press on, and I'll give the floor to Eamon for some final comments and questions. Maybe there was at least one question to Anna in the chat.
Indeed, yes. I mean, Anna, we've got a question here following your very interesting and very personal sort of testimony about your experiences. What did you think was the most helpful resource or support that was provided for you whilst you were making such great efforts to try and find employment? So what worked for you best? What was the most useful thing? Perhaps for Anna, yeah?
Yes,
for the Spanish, Spanish Anna.
Apologies, yes, the Spanish Anna, yeah.
We're just going to take one question to Spain, and then we'll come back and give you another try.
Okay. Yeah. So Anna, would you be able to give us any observations of all the things you were doing to try and find a job? What was the most useful support that you actually received? What was the most helpful thing for you when you were looking for work?
Sorry, my internet I don't listen to anything.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question and I can answer?
Of course I can. You gave us a very kind of inspiring and personal testimonial about all of the things you were doing to seek work. What do you think was the most helpful aspects of your job search? What was the support that was most useful for you when you were looking for work? What was the kind of thing that helped you the most?
Okay, I think that I could give like 3 tips, for example. I say that it's important the employment guidance with a focus on employability for young people, and also training for those with less education and less formation in jobs. And the last, I think that maybe promote policies to generate a better quality labor market, and create more productive economy. I mean, because for example, here in Spain, work sometimes is based on services only. And I think that we need to promote other jobs to develop our economy and try to do better. I don't know if that's answered.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Perhaps got a question, perhaps for Michael, if I may, Michelle rather. Do you think, Michelle, there's more that we could be doing to encourage young people to develop startups with their ideas? So rather than looking for a track moving towards waged employment, could we do more to encourage young people to kind of put their very good, interesting entrepreneurial ideas into practice? Do you think possibly?
Okay, maybe it's a good idea, but I think that we have to find other solutions, because if everyone becomes and do a startup, I think that it's going to be difficult to create more collective jobs. So in my opinion, I think that we have to try to insert people in public services in general. And for example, as in the case of Spain, I think that, for example, after the retirement of the baby boom here, I think that we have to face the need to replenish public employment. And this can also give stability to young people. So in my opinion, I think that we have to face this problem with public services, and not only to do like startups and these type of things that are more individual. And I think that they don't solve the problem.
Okay, thank you very much,
Michelle
Anna.
can answer that question, and then we'll perhaps go back to Business Europe and see if we can hear from, after Michelle answers, and we'll give another try to Dr. Kivek.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Any observations you have as well, building on Anna's points about could we do more to encourage startups amongst young people, particularly graduates?
It could be a good idea, because only a small proportion of graduates are involved in a startup. It's less than 5%. With some exceptions, like dentistry, it's almost 60%. But most of the types of study, well, it's less than 5%. And well, there is an opportunity for a lot of young graduates to start up a small enterprise. And also, for example, graduates who studied abroad and come back and have their network and could start business all over Europe. So I think it would be a good idea to promote this.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we're going to have another, hopefully attempt to see if our Business Europe colleague can rejoin the conversation. So fingers crossed.
Yes, thank you so much. In Poland, we say we try up to 3 times. So let's hope that this time it's going to work. Anyway, maybe I will just say that for us, it's very important that the guidance on the labor market, and it's not only important for young people when they move from labor.
Anna, can I ask you to turn your video off?
Was very inspiring.
Still breaking up.
And I do confirm that from our point of view, it's very important that young people have the information and they understand this information. So everything that was mentioned, return on investment in education, how their future profession life can look like. Maybe I'll stop the camera. Maybe that will help.
Yes, I think please. Yeah, I think that's probably
yeah. So let's do that. So the first thing on guidance, very important to have the information available, understand in an understandable way. So the young people understand what their decisions concerning profession mean in return on investment, their future perspectives. Very, very important. And I would like to say that it doesn't mean that we have to, that young people need to resign from their dreams or having a dream education. But, you know, on the side of this dream education, maybe they need to think more pragmatically and equip themselves in skills that are needed on the labor market. The second point, reaching out to inactive, very important. And also here I would like to mention the digital aspect of that, because this is a twofold aspect, in the sense that this is important for public employment services to use digital tools to be able to reach out to the inactive, but also for those who are inactive, the digital skills enable to integrate with the labor market and start their professional career. The third point would be very important on this targeted solutions experiment we've heard in France. I'm sorry, I think it's hopeless.
We have been able to hear you. We have,
yes?
Maybe, keep trying.
Okay, so the third point, very important on targeted solution experiments, like in France. I think it's very, very interesting to have targeted measures for different groups of people, for example, from the young from urban areas, from young from rural areas, for young people with disabilities. So I think we'll see more and more of this targeted solutions. So the French example was very interesting and inspiring in this case. And the last point, I think all the presenters underline the importance of cooperation with different stakeholders and different organizations, healthcare, social services, NGOs active in different areas, for example, in helping the unemployed youth. And maybe last comment from the employer's perspective, we see that now, as a result of pandemics, we need to kind of move in two speeds. One speed is on daily business, addressing short-term challenges related to adjusting to the situation. So in this sense, we see the role of PES as supporting companies, for example, in continuing company-based learning programs.
We've just lost. We heard everything right up until the, I think your final.
Yeah. Well,
point.
My final point is that because of the pandemic, we really need to address short-term challenges, but also long-term. So in the short term, especially in relation to cooperation with PES, would be assisting employers in continuing company-based training, apprenticeship programs, which become, of course, more challenging. We see, for example, that in Austria, Germany, there are less applicants for apprenticeships, and also companies are more careful in committing themselves to a 3-4 year program. But also at the same time, long-term challenges such as supporting the transitional labor market, but transition to those jobs or those activities that will be sustainable in the long term. Thank you very much, and I'm so sorry for for all the breaks.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to hear your interesting points. I think we got there in the end, so it was worth persisting. Eamon, before I hand the floor, I think we can allow ourselves perhaps an extra 5 minutes after past, just to allow some questions and reflections on what we've heard to make up for the technical issues, unless anyone tells me that we're definitely not allowed to do that. So I'll hand you the floor, Eamon, if you can sort of deal with whichever questions you think we can take on. If you can then give your final comments. Okay. And then I'll just give people some practical details about access to presentations and things like that. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, got a question here for you about, do you think we are doing enough to particularly kind of track the outcomes and needs of young people with disabilities in terms of their future kind of labour market prospects? Is there anything you can add on the subject of that particular group of people with the special barriers towards future, perhaps career development and labour market integration?
It's not really my research topic. I'm more involved in transition from school to work. So I'm not an expert on this, but well, in the Netherlands, we do have a lot of young people with disability benefit. And a part of them also work. It's about 1 out of 4 of them who actually work and get their disability benefit. But well, it could be very important for them, of course, to find jobs and to stay in that job. Most of the times they find a job, but it's a temporary job. and they lose their job within a year, and then it all starts again. So it's important also to have sustainable jobs for them.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a question, Carl, actually, in the context of the crisis that's now, unfortunately, we've been in the midst of it now for slightly, probably over a year. Have you noticed any particular changes in the situation of the young people you work with as a direct consequence of the COVID pandemic, Carl, particularly in terms of how easy or difficult it is to actually connect with some of your young people initially and how you communicate with them during this period?
You're muted, Carl. Sorry.
Well, the big difference is, I think, that is that we are not able to meet them face to face as often as we did before. But we have connections with WhatsApp. We have video meetings with them, and so the normal services. We have training also, but with less people in the company, and there are some things that we had to stop, and that we have to do alternative things. And we see also that the internships and also the placement, the labor markets is a bit close to now. So that's a big difference that we achieve. But the target group that is coming to us, there is no difference between before the corona and what we receive now. So there is no difference in the target group.
Okay, thank you. A question I've got for Ashley, actually focusing on a lot of the very good work that Pôle emploi does with employers generally. We hear a lot, quite rightly, about needing to make sure that we encourage people to undergo training programs that particularly encourage employability. And we've heard a lot this morning about the importance of giving people guidance in terms of the kind of study they could pursue that's more likely to lead to a successful career and a job, particularly in the new transitional labour markets we are now entering. But perhaps, Ashley, do you think perhaps there is sometimes more that employers might be able to do to understand the benefits of the learning that young people have got and the experiences young people have got? So perhaps a slightly more flexible approach to appreciating the skills and qualifications of young people that could be a good fit for a job, even if it's not so directly, obviously related to it.
Thank you, Eamon. This is a very good point, actually. Thank you for asking this question. And quite rightly and honestly, I must say that employers are more and more aware of that and do value young people with maybe less skills or not qualifications, but do engage into training them within the company in order to ensure a sustainable job afterwards. So there are many incentives that Pôle emploi can provide, and the partners also, in order to achieve these goals. And we accompany both companies and job seekers into the construction of a pedagogical pathway, and also in order to understand a little bit more about the needs of the company, but also to value the skills that we already can diagnose within the individual. And we try to make both of them match in order to meet the expectancies and make sure that the job gets sustainability in the end.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a question for Anna from the youth perspective here, actually. Could you perhaps give us a couple of observations about what you think are most important in terms of the way that messages are given to young people about particular opportunities? Is there any way that they could be improved? What are the kind of messages, or what way are messages delivered that most connect, you think, with young people, encouraging a positive response?
It's for me, no?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think that sometimes we focus on the education of young people, and in my case, for example, I think that we are qualified to work. So maybe what I will do is focus the measures in that I said before in public services, and for example, in how to involve people in employees, because sometimes we only focus on information, and okay, that's okay, because some people don't have this information, but in my opinion, I think that most of the people, we studied a lot, and we are and the employees are underqualified for us. It's not about our qualification, it's about the qualification of employees. So maybe we have to think about that, and that's all. And in my opinion, sometimes also we think that we are bad because our mental health is not good because the issues and the environment. But I think that if we never I don't know how to say, invert money in create a public employee for young people, these conditions never go change. So I think that maybe we have to change our view. That's my point of view.
Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do perhaps for a final question is to our other Youth Forum representative from Edelmira, also from Spain. If there are two particular things you think that, this is for our other Youth Forum representative, two particular things that you think need to be urgently addressed to try and ensure that young people can be given the correct support during the COVID recovery period, what do you think those two particular things would be? So any two things that you could change this morning, what would they be from our other Youth Forum colleague?
I think that we should, in the government perspective, they should make efforts in offering alternative and technical training courses that help job seekers to fit in the market. As I said before, I think that we don't have we're not matching the needs of any labor market. So I think that one of the things that we could do in this pandemic crisis is that preparing people for the jobs that are actually available to them. And as I mentioned before, we have to focus on programs, on European programs like the Youth Warranty one, which are always available, but most people sometimes they don't even know. We can maybe take advantage of those and travel and learn while this period of time where we cannot really find any jobs, but maybe we can take advantage of those kind of programs. I think those could be two options.
Thank you very much. And of course, very, I think, encouragingly, helpfully and correctly, of course, the youth guarantee has been reinforced during the new funding period for the period going ahead, which was a decision taken before the COVID pandemic, but again, a decision that has proven to be a very wise one, even more so now than it was thought at the time. Stressing I'm back in the same time zone as everybody else. I think it's now 25 to midday. So I think perhaps, sadly, again, as ever, time has been our enemy after a very, very interesting discussion. And I think before handing back to Ed for some final bits of information, just a few overall conclusions from me. I think one thing that's emerged very clearly is that information is crucial, whether it's labour market information at the macro level or information for employers, and particularly information delivered in an appropriate way for young people. Labour market information asymmetry is one of the classic and most well understood difficulties in labour markets not working properly, or causes of that. Personalised support is clearly key, even more than ever, for dealing with the integration needs of young people. We've said that the COVID crisis has actually fast-tracked many trends that were already very prevalent in the labour market prior to a year ago. I think fortunately PES were already very aware of these changes, particularly with the future of work and changes in the labour market, and they've been aware of the need to work even more closely with their stakeholders to provide specialist support. During the crisis, these partnerships have become even more important, especially as very specialist assistance is needed to prevent some of the more vulnerable young people falling even further behind in the job queue. Clearly, the voice of employers is always very, very important and must be listened to in terms of encouraging public employment services and other institutions to make sure that employability does feature in the work they do to guide young people's trajectory to employability and back to work. And perhaps finally, and most importantly, the most important voice of all in this conversation is that of the young people themselves. We've heard some commentary that sadly there is a risk that for the first time perhaps ever, or certainly for many, many decades, young people are at risk of being in a worse position on the labour market and in their future careers than their parents, which is obviously a very, very, very negative prospect for reasons that don't need to be further explained. But hopefully, given the very, very interesting inputs this morning from lots of organisations, we're in a very good position to try and hope that that doesn't happen. And with that thought, I'll hand you back to Ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Eamon, for that excellent roundup, and thank you again to all our presenters and also the participants with their questions. It's been a lively and interesting discussion, and some of these conversations are going on in the chat as we speak. So it's really interesting to see. So just a few final practical points from me. One, after we close this meeting, I think you'll receive an opportunity to sign up for the PES Network newsletter. If you're not signed up for that, I encourage you to do that. You'll be able to keep up to date with the different activities and outputs, things that you might have missed. For example, last summer, the PES Network published an opinion paper highlighting the key role of public employment services in delivering the youth guarantee. So there's lots of relevant content and output being produced by the PES Network. So keep up to date with that by signing up for the newsletter. A reminder that all the slides from the presentations today in the agenda will be uploaded onto the Circ ABC platform, which many of you will know, but might be new to some of you. It's the platform that the PES Network uses for document sharing. I believe the link is going to be posted into the chat. I think it just has been. So the link is there in the chat. You can see. So go there if you want to be able to access the documents from today's webinar. There's also, this has been recorded, and everyone who registered for the event will receive the link to the recording of this webinar. If there's anything you want to check back on or anything you missed, you can go back and look again. Apart from that, yeah, just a final, again, thank you to everyone. I think you'll also probably be asked for feedback on this if you have further thoughts on these type of events and how we run them. Always grateful to hear feedback and potentially other topics you'd like to hear discussed. So with that, I wish you all a very good afternoon, and good luck. Keep working on these important topics for young people and the future of the labour market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah, you too.